You should not let yourself be trapped by the Americans and Zionists. That is a direct line from Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim Zolfagari, speaking for Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters about the UAE, and it exposes the real warning beneath the viral Habibi missile message. Today we are breaking down the line, Habibi, when America leaves, it will just be you and me, and separating its chilling strategic meaning from the unverified social media image that carried it. We will use only what CENTCOM, Reuters, the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, UAE authorities, and Iran's own state media have actually confirmed. Stick around, because by the end of this, you will understand why the photographed missile cannot yet be treated as authenticated evidence, why Tehran denied one alleged attack while issuing a broader threat, why a port outside Hormuz became the most revealing target in the story, and why I think Iran is not primarily asking the UAE to abandon America, but to become the mechanism that restrains America, which I'm going to walk you through at the very end. There is a lot of loud talk online presenting the phrase as a confirmed personal note painted on a missile specifically launched at the UAE. The exact photograph appears to originate from social media circulation, and I found no authentication of its origin, launch status, destination, or date from a major independent outlet or official source. That does not make the strategic message imaginary. Iran's official warnings use almost the same logic, so let us separate the viral artifact from the documented campaign, sourced step by step. Look at the map for a second. The Strait of Hormuz is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and the commercial shipping lanes are narrower still. Before the conflict, the waterway carried roughly 1/5 of global energy supplies, making a small patch of sea consequential far beyond the Gulf. The UAE's cities, air bases, ports, oil terminals, and airports sit within the same compressed geography as Iranian missile units, naval forces, islands, and coastal radars. Al Dhafra Air Base in Abu Dhabi has historically hosted around 2,000 American personnel and supported surveillance aircraft, drones, and advanced fighters. Fujairah sits outside Hormuz and connects to the Habshan pipeline, which can move roughly 1.5 million to 1.8 million barrels of crude per day around the strait. By March 3rd, UAE authorities said they had detected 186 ballistic missiles, 8 cruise missiles, and 812 drones since the attacks began. By March 7th, those totals had risen to 221 ballistic missiles, 8 cruise missiles, and 1,305 drones. By March 14th, the official count had reached 294 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and 1,600 drones. By May 8th, the UAE said its defenses had intercepted 551 ballistic missiles, 29 cruise missiles, and 2,263 drones. Those are Emirati government figures, and Iran disputed responsibility for some renewed incidents, so attribution must remain attached to the source. Even so, the scale tells you why one short phrase could resonate. The message did not enter an empty information space. It entered a country where repeated alerts had already trained millions of people to connect a phone vibration, a distant flash, and a sudden flight diversion with the possibility of attack. The chronology begins on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel began striking Iran, and Tehran retaliated against American-linked targets across Gulf countries. Reuters reported that Iranian missiles and drones crossed the airspace of multiple Gulf states hosting American military facilities. Iran described American bases and interests as the targets. Gulf governments described attacks on their sovereignty, infrastructure, residents, and economic lifelines. Watch the first radar picture here. A weapon directed toward an American facility in the UAE still enters Emirati airspace, activates Emirati defenses, disrupts Emirati airports, and creates debris risk over Emirati communities. That means the attacker's stated target and the host country's experienced target can be different without either description being meaningless. On March 3rd, Reuters reported that analysts believed Iran's strikes were intended to push 6 Gulf states to pressure Washington to halt the war. The same analysts warned that the campaign could backfire by driving those governments into a broader anti-Iran coalition. The Gulf Cooperation Council invoked collective self-defense language and activated joint air defense and reconnaissance measures, according to Reuters. Put the official totals on screen for a moment. On March 5th, the UAE said it detected 7 ballistic missiles and 131 drones in a single day. On March 6th, it reported another 9 ballistic missiles and 112 drones. On March 7th, it reported 16 ballistic missiles and 121 drones. The point is not that every projectile reached a target. The point is that interception success still produces sirens, closed airspace, diverted aircraft, exhausted crews, expensive interceptor launches, and falling fragments. Satellite imagery reviewed by the Associated Press later showed damage at Al Dhafra Air Base, including one hangar scarred by fire and another with roof damage. The imagery did not establish what equipment had been inside those structures. Zoom in on the Al Dhafra hangars here. A base can remain operational while its political cost rises sharply. On March 28th, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian publicly told neighboring states not to let Iran's enemies conduct the war from their territory. That warning sounded conditional rather than openly expansionist. It offered safety in exchange for restrictions on how regional territory could be used. On May 4th, the UAE said it intercepted 3 Iranian missiles, while a 4th fell into the sea, and authorities responded to additional missile and drone threats. Reuters reported that inbound flights diverted to Oman or circled over Saudi Arabia as UAE airports temporarily closed. A fire broke out in the Fujairah oil industry zone after what Emirati authorities described as a drone attack originating from Iran, and 3 people were moderately injured. Iranian state media cited a senior military official, saying Iran had no plan to target the UAE. 2 days later, Iran's own IRNA published the fuller denial from Lieutenant Colonel Zolfagari. He said Iranian forces had not carried out recent missile or drone operations against the UAE and would have announced any action clearly. Then the same statement warned the UAE not to host American and Israeli military forces and equipment. Freeze those 2 positions on screen. Iran denied the specific operation while defining the circumstances that could justify a future response. That pairing is more strategically useful than a simple admission or denial. It keeps attribution contested while leaving the intended political pressure unmistakable. On May 8th, Reuters reported another UAE claim that its defenses engaged 2 ballistic missiles and 3 drones from Iran, causing 3 moderate injuries. Iran's Fars agency reported sporadic clashes in Hormuz, while Tasnim cited a military source saying the situation had calmed but more clashes were possible. That is, the adversary's own media confirming that the contest extended beyond public statements into recurring military friction. By July, the conflict had returned to sustained exchanges around Hormuz. According to CENTCOM's own statement, American forces struck more than 80 Iranian targets on July 7th, including over 60 Revolutionary Guard small boats. On July 11th, CENTCOM said it hit approximately 140 targets in 1 round and more than 300 targets across 3 nights. CENTCOM said more than 800 commercial vessels and 400 million barrels of crude had transited with American assistance since early May. By July 21st, the command raised those figures to approximately 900 vessels and 450 million barrels. CENTCOM also alleged that Iran had attacked more than 30 commercial vessels over 3 months. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said 2 offending supertankers had been hit after ignoring warnings, and accused the United States of promoting an illegal route. Watch the shipping lanes here. Each side was no longer only fighting over vessels. They were fighting over which authority could define lawful movement through the strait. On July 28th, Reuters reported that Oman had presented Iran with a regional mechanism to manage Hormuz, using voluntary fees and shared responsibilities rather than sole Iranian control. That proposal arrived after the United States suspended a bombing campaign, and President Trump said talks had a chance to produce a deal, while warning strikes could resume. The story therefore ends, for now, not with a verified Habibi missile impact, but with negotiations over who writes the rules of the waterway. If you want the real story instead of whatever exaggerated headline is trending this week, subscribe and turn on notifications, because I am going to keep tracking this one specifically. The next update might be the one where the contest over bases, shipping rules, and Emirati neutrality actually breaks. Now let us examine why the phrase is effective even without authenticated provenance. Habibi normally signals affection or familiarity. Placed inside a military warning, it creates forced intimacy. It turns relations between states into a conversation between 2 neighbors who cannot move away from one another. The second part of the phrase does the heavier work. When America leaves, presents the United States as temporary. It will just be you and me, presents Iranian proximity as permanent. Bring the viral image back onto the screen. The message tells an Emirati audience that Washington can decide when to escalate, when to negotiate, and when to redeploy. But the UAE must live with the geographic aftermath. That is psychological pressure aimed at time horizons. America thinks in deployments, administrations, and operations. The UAE and Iran think in coastlines, ports, trade routes, and permanent neighborhoods. The phrase also attacks confidence in alliance control. A Gulf government can host foreign assets without controlling every strategic decision associated with them, and Iran exploits that separation. It tells Abu Dhabi that the outside partner can create danger, whose debris, insurance costs, flight cancellations, and diplomatic consequences remain inside the host country. The mechanism does not require total military superiority. It requires enough capability, conditional threats, and ambiguity to make every decision feel costly. Iran also faces serious constraints. Broad attacks on Gulf civilians or infrastructure can unite states that previously preferred hedging. Reuters reported analysts arguing that Iran's initial strikes strengthened Gulf unity and pushed governments toward Washington. Repeated attacks can therefore produce the opposite of Tehran's intended result. The UAE faces a mirror image constraint. More American and Israeli support may improve immediate defense. The same visible support gives Tehran more material for claiming that Emirati territory is an enemy platform. One side calls the system a shield, the other calls it preparation for attack. Every response then appears to validate the other side's fear. This is a security dilemma compressed into missile flight time. Iran's warning is dangerous because it offers the UAE an apparently simple escape from that dilemma. Restrict the outsiders, and the neighbor may reduce the pressure. But accepting that logic would give Tehran influence over Emirati alliances without requiring a treaty, occupation, or decisive military victory. The obvious read is that Iran wants every American soldier and Israeli system removed from the UAE. There's another read that goes deeper into how operational decisions are actually made. I am naming it now, but I am withholding the verdict. There's one read of all this that I think is the correct one, and it is not the obvious one. But I'm not going to hand it to you yet, because there are two more things you need to see first, and they're the two things that changed my mind. Quick gut check. Drop a comment right now with just the single word shield if you think Iranian pressure will push the UAE deeper into American and Israeli protection, or distance if you think it will make Abu Dhabi restrict how those partners can use Emirati territory. I genuinely want to see where this audience lands before I give you my own read at the end of this video. The first thing is the May 4 incident at the Fujairah oil industry zone. Fujairah is the point where the UAE tries to escape the geography of Hormuz. Its oil pipeline allows crude produced around Abu Dhabi to reach the Gulf of Oman without entering the narrow strait. That route can move up to roughly 1.8 million barrels per day, making the eastern port a strategic insurance policy rather than just another terminal. When conflict obstructs the western side of the UAE, economic value concentrates in Fujairah. That concentration creates resilience and vulnerability at the same time. On May 4th, UAE authorities said a drone originating from Iran caused a fire inside the oil zone and injured 3 people. Iran denied targeting the UAE. The same day, Emirati defenses reported intercepting 3 missiles, with a 4th falling into the sea, while airports closed and flights diverted. The incident combined a physical fire, air defense engagement, commercial disruption, denial, and an official warning about American and Israeli access. Put the fire, the flight map, the denial, and the warning on screen together. The strategic effect did not depend on every audience accepting the same account of responsibility. Emirati officials could treat the incident as Iranian aggression. Iranian officials could reject the accusation. Ship owners, airlines, insurers, investors, and residents still had to respond to the danger. That is what makes ambiguity operationally useful. It creates real costs without producing one uncontested narrative that demands one uncontested response. Fujairah also reveals the limit of physical bypasses. A pipeline can bypass at choke point. It cannot bypass missile range, drone range, electronic surveillance, sabotage risk, or political coercion. Every successful adaptation creates a new asset whose importance can be threatened. The more shipping and oil move east, the more valuable the eastern terminals become. The more valuable the terminals become, the more leverage a credible warning against them can generate. That does not prove every disputed incident was part of one perfect plan, but the location made the warning powerful. The viral Habibi line says the United States can leave. Fujairah says the UAE's infrastructure cannot. That's the first of the 2 things I mentioned. Forget the maps for a moment. You're a night shift operator at Fujairah, and the sea beyond the terminal is black and flat. The air smells of salt, diesel, and hot metal. A low mechanical hum moves through the pipes beneath your boots. Your radio crackles and then falls silent. A warning tone cuts across the yard. You look toward the storage tanks. Workers around you turn their heads at the same moment. Someone pulls a helmet strap tight. Another person points toward a sheltered doorway. The loading arms stop moving. A distant flash appears above the coast and vanishes. A heavy sound rolls across the terminal. The glass in a nearby cabin trembles. You hear boots striking concrete. A gloved hand holds the emergency door open. Inside, the ventilation fan rattles above people staring at their phones. Your screen lights up in your palm. You think about the road home. You think about the people asleep there. Nobody knows whether the sound came from an incoming weapon, an interceptor, falling debris, or something farther away. The machinery outside is quiet now. The ship lights remain fixed beyond the window. The opposite coast is still there. You wait for the radio to speak again. That's the layer underneath every number I just gave you. And it's the second thing that changed how I read this. I want to be clear that this next part is my opinion, not reported fact. I do not think Iran's primary objective is to make the UAE formally expel the United States in one dramatic decision. I think Tehran wants Abu Dhabi to become an unofficial veto point inside the American military system. Run it forward. If every American operation launched from or supported by Emirati territory creates immediate risk to Emirati ports, airports, energy sites, and civilians, then UAE leaders must demand advance notice, impose conditions, restrict missions, or refuse access. The base can remain open. The alliance can remain intact. American aircraft can remain on the runway. But operational freedom becomes narrower because the host government fears the retaliation that follows. Suddenly, destroying the base stops being necessary, and influencing the host becomes the cheaper move left on the board. That is more subtle than forcing an American withdrawal. It turns the alliance's geography into a brake on the alliance's power. The Habibi message is therefore not simply saying America will abandon you. It is telling the UAE that America cannot protect you from every consequence of what America does from your territory. The read that beats mine is that Iran's campaign is mostly uncontrolled retaliation and that the personalized message is merely unauthenticated propaganda attached afterward. Here's why I don't buy it. The image remains unverified, but Iran's president, military spokesperson, state media, and maritime forces repeatedly connected regional safety to restrictions on American and Israeli activity. The pattern is too consistent to dismiss as one dramatic photograph. If you want deep dives like this, the moment new information actually gets confirmed, share this with one person who's been confused by the louder, less careful takes floating around. Here is the clean 5-point summary. First, the specific missile photograph and its exact Habibi inscription remain unverified by the major independent and official sources reviewed for this script. Second, the underlying warning is real because Iran's own IRNA quoted a named military spokesperson telling the UAE not to host or assist American and Israeli forces. Third, UAE authorities reported hundreds of ballistic missiles, dozens of cruise missiles, and thousands of drones, while Iran disputed responsibility for some renewed attacks. Fourth, Reuters, AP, WAM, and CENTCOM documented disruption or damage involving Al Dhafra, Fujairah, Baraka, airports, tankers, and commercial traffic through Hormuz. Fifth, the latest diplomacy is focused on rules for Hormuz, showing that the struggle is about authority, access, and behavior as much as physical destruction. So the title needs one precise resolution. Habibi, just you and me is chilling because it compresses a verified coercive strategy into a personal sentence. It does not prove that the pictured missile was authentic, that the inscription was official, or that one specific weapon carrying those words was launched at the UAE. What the record does prove is that Tehran has told Abu Dhabi that cooperation with American and Israeli forces can make Emirati territory, infrastructure, and interests vulnerable to retaliation. The image may be uncertain. The doctrine behind it is not. Now return to your one-word answer. Are you still on shield, meaning deeper outside protection, or did the debrief move you toward distance, meaning tighter limits on how foreign forces operate from Emirati soil? That choice is the real warning hidden beneath the viral phrase. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never confuse noise with signal.